as Ken has very clearly exemplified to me in those early days, is that academics or academic science can create businesses. And Ken also told me that interferon would be interesting and I should continue working on this. So I went back to crossing channels. From Edinburgh, I went to do a PhD in the University of London on interferons. Then I went to Toronto, which is where I met Eleanor. And I did a postdoc on interferon-induced genes. In those days, we had found 3 or 4 interferon-induced genes, and that kept me busy for about 4 years. And then I did a second postdoc in what was then called the Imperial Cancer Research Fund, which is now called the Cancer Research UK. By then, we had found about 100 interferon-induced genes, so that could have kept me busy for the rest of my life had I wanted to do that. But I realized that that probably wouldn't keep me going as a person, and a chance event led me to join a company called the Wellcome Biotech. At that time, interferon had sort of made the bigger headlines. This is the front page of Time magazine in 1980, March 1980, which was before the first recombinant protein was ever used as a therapy. And I became involved in the manufacture of interferon. So Wellcome Biotech was one of the first companies to develop commercial interferon together with Biogen, which I mentioned earlier. And I ran a group which that was our job was to develop the cell lines to manufacture drugs. I was fortunate enough to work on the company's interferon product, which was called Welfron, but also another molecule called MAP-Campath or Campath 1H, which is still used today clinically. Its trade name is alemtuzumab. It's sold under the name of Lemtrada by company by Genzyme. I think the thing I would like to stress here is for me, it was absolutely fantastic to be able to be involved in a project which resulted in drugs being being manufactured and used to treat people. And that, as a researcher, I never felt as if I was able to achieve that. So for me, from then on, it was going to be industry. I was going to stay in that, and I made the rest of my career in the manufacture of biological drugs. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I just want to give you an idea of what this industry looks like. Today, there are about 400 biologic drugs in clinical use. The modern era of recombinant drugs started in 1982 with the release, with the launch of recombinant human insulin. Prior to that, insulin was made from the pancreas of pigs. So this was really a revolution. Every year there are about 1,000 clinical trials started for new drugs. And these drugs are manufactured in 20,000 liter bioreactors. And it's absolutely thrilling to know that the little vial of cells that I put into the freezer some years ago are still today being resurrected and scaled up into these 20,000 liter fermenters and used to manufacture drugs. It's quite an experience to be part of something like that. So just in terms of what the industry looks like, really, this is the global pharmaceutical industry. Currently, there are about just over 4.5 million people globally employed in the pharmaceutical industry, and most of those are scientists. 60% have degrees in, so a bachelor's degree in science, and about 30% of them, a third of them have PhD degrees. The companies are very large. J&J is, in terms of number of employees, the largest company in the pharma company in the world, with around 135,000 employees, and they manufacture and have R&D sites in over 30 countries. So these are very significant opportunities, employment opportunities for scientists. I have had the privilege of working with all kinds of people, immunologists, virologists, molecular biologists, chemists, bioinformaticians. I've even enjoyed working with patent lawyers, with sales and marketing people who are not as boring as it sounds. Even the government regulators have an important role to play in all of these things. And it's an amazing opportunity to be able to work with so many different people. And to me, really, what this illustrates is the conversion of science into products that people use, and that patients benefit from. And to me, this is what this is all about. Now, the other thing that sometimes people say to me is, yeah, but scientists do all the menial work, and you know, the business people take all the credit and make all the money. Well, I don't think that's true either. Scientists reach the very top. These are the CEOs of some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and many of them are scientists. They join the companies as researchers, and in time progress to the top. Somebody like Olivier Brandicourt at Sanofi actually worked for 2 years as a doctor in a malaria hospital in Africa. Then he went back to Paris and did 6 years of research in malaria before joining industry and eventually reaching the top of Sanofi. Pascal Soriot was a practicing vet before he joined industry and eventually became head of AstraZeneca. So to me, scientists should be active throughout the whole of the pharmaceutical industry, and play an important role to bring medicines to people. So back to my own personal story. As Eleanor pointed out, after Wellcome Biotech, I joined AstraZeneca, which was called Astra at that time. It was just before the merger. Astra was a company at that time with 60,000 employees. And I left AstraZeneca to join Gemini Genomics, where we were 4 employees. Still, I was the overall theme of what I was doing was the same. At Wellcome, I was, as I said, I was trying to manufacture drugs. At Astra, I was discovering drugs. At Gemini, I was discovering the targets for drugs. So there's some more the target discovery associating genes with disease, and then designing drugs around those genes. I'm now at Horizon Discovery, and I'm head of bioproduction. So we produce manufacturing systems for biologic drugs that we sell to countries all over the world. We are a relatively small company of 450 people. And we are focused primarily on gene editing. So we use gene editing technologies to create cell lines to manufacture drugs. So just as perhaps as a final sort of conclusion, or some thoughts about academia and research. To me, the science research that happens in academia or in industry or in the research charities, the third sector, are completely interchangeable and interdependent on each other. All the scientists are trained in academia, and there are career opportunities in industry. And I have numerous friends who have gone from academia to industry, spent 10, 12 years in industry, and then gone back to academia. And then even some of them move back again to industry. Here in Cambridge, where there are about 150 life science companies, biotech and small pharma companies, as well as the headquarters of AstraZeneca, and of course the University of Cambridge. We recruit most scientists from Cambridge University, and those scientists will move on to go to other companies, or some of them actually move back to the university and take up university positions. Science solves problems, or at least usually it tries to. It's a global industry. There are job opportunities all over the world, and you get a chance of interacting with all kinds of disciplines. And just as illustration, my own team here in Horizon, the biomanufacturing team at Horizon, I think illustrates some of the things that I've said quite well. We have Portuguese, French, Einar is Icelandic. We've just recruited Prasad from India. I claim to be from Germany and Brazil. We have Scotland represented. It is a multinational. Evie joined us from Greece recently. It is a multinational industry. It's it creates jobs all over the world and opportunities all over the world. So I could stop here, but I have just one last little channel to share with you, and this is really a little bit more of a personal story. But you may be aware that there is a piece of water separating England and France called the Strait of Dover, which is part of the English Channel. This is 36 kilometers or 21 miles of stretch of water that goes between Dover and Calais. And every year there are a small number of crazy people who try to swim across that. About half of them succeed. Last year in August, I became one of those people to swim across from Dover to Calais in just under 16 hours. So to me, the moral of the story is that scientists can be CEOs, and scientists can also swim from England to France successfully. That's really where I think I should leave it there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And I noticed your route isn't very direct. And is that the same with science? We tend to not take the shortest route, but take a long, circuitous route.
Yeah. I think that's kind of an interesting observation. The reason why you can't swim in a straight line is because of the tide.
Oh yeah, I believe you. Okay.
But you're absolutely right. I think sometimes you have to go left or right, not because you want to, but because somebody else or something else is pushing you in that direction.
Okay, so there are a couple of questions, if you've got a few moments, that we'd like to run by you. So one of them is the cost of actually taking a drug from discovery to into the clinic has risen exponentially. I've heard of the order of now $2 billion from discovery into the clinic. I mean, that is an incredible deterrent. Can you first, I've got two questions around that. One is, what does it cost so much now? And secondly, does that mean that for orphan diseases or therapeutics, Big Pharma is just not going to engage?
Well, you're absolutely right that you know, the cost of getting a drug into the clinic, and not only into the clinic but actually onto the market, because the majority of the cost will actually be absorbed by the clinical trials to go from the first test in man to the actual licensed drug. It has risen for a whole variety of reasons: manufacturing, R&D, failure of R&D, failure of clinical trials. I think we are seeing very slowly gradual shifts towards different approaches to clinical testing that you know, will result in shorter timelines, but also a change in the revenue structure for companies. In terms of rare diseases and orphan diseases, again, I think the regulators are making more and more moves to improve the situation so that they have accelerated discovery and clinical trial protocols that allow for that. And the companies are also have much better incentives now to engage in that work. There are many, perhaps not the big pharma companies, because big pharma companies are, as you quite rightly point out, are really, they're after the blockbuster drugs, but there are many small companies that are specifically focused on orphan diseases and rare diseases, because their structure, their cost structure is far more acceptable, or let's say in tune with the kinds of different commercial models that you would have to follow for the rare diseases.
Another issue that I think many of us are aware of, certainly those of you who are in Africa, perhaps, and in India, are probably nodding your heads when I say this, is that there are, for example, infectious diseases which are peculiar to certain jurisdictions, which may not necessarily jump on a plane like coronavirus and end up in another place. But, for example, Lassa fever, which is restricted through bites from rats, which, you know, if you find a therapeutic for, nobody's going to be able to afford to pay for that therapeutic in the current paradigm. So how can you speculate on how those kinds of diseases in regions which you know, have poor income or low income resources, how do you go about making discoveries or motivate people to, I don't know, produce an anti-infective or a therapeutic or a diagnostic?
Yeah, yes, I think you're hitting on one of the age-old problems here in drug discovery. But I think what we've seen emerge over the last 20 years are on the one side, the charities or the non-government organizations that are engaged in research, and the Wellcome Trust in the UK spends a lot of money on malaria research, for example, and has research stations in Africa. You have the Gates Foundation, which is investing more than most governments on developing approaches, including drugs and vaccines for diseases which otherwise would not be addressed by either governments or companies. So I think we still have a long way to go. But I think, you know, we are heading towards a better situation than we have in the past.
Another question that came up was, how much does the political landscape and attitude towards drug companies affect innovation by smaller biotechs? And how do we get big pharma to have more partnerships with academia? So I guess that's two questions.
I'm not so this idea that big pharma doesn't engage with academia, I think is not the case. Big pharma is completely dependent on academia, as I've said in my presentation. And to illustrate that, it's interesting to note that AstraZeneca had their headquarters in the middle of England on a campus that was surrounded by basically forests and was designed to be secluded because they were very secretive. And Pfizer had their big R&D place here in the UK as well, which was very secluded, and nobody would, for the purposes of secrecy and all that. Now, AstraZeneca have built their global HQ and R&D head center right in the middle of Cambridge, in the middle of the main hospital here, and has shared research departments with the university. So there's university and AstraZeneca scientists working in the same labs and mingling on a day-to-day basis. I think this illustrates that pharma companies have realized that they cannot do research to the extent that they need to. In fact, I would say that pharma companies have moved towards the position where they do the drug discovery, the late stage drug discovery, but they're completely dependent on academia to provide them with the basic knowledge, basic science of disease in order to structure their drug discovery programs around. So they are, that is the way that they're approaching things today. With respect to the relationship between small biotech company and large companies, it is a complete ecosystem. Again, large pharma companies cannot survive without the small companies. And in fact, a lot of the drugs that the pharma companies launch onto the market were never discovered by them. They were discovered by small biotech companies or small pharma companies, startup companies in various, all over the world, that get acquired by pharma companies. And that's the way things work. And at one level, they're working quite well.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, maybe we'll have a couple of minute presentation from one of my colleagues here, Payam, one of the co-founders of BSI, will talk a little bit about how you go from actually working as a graduate student to start up a company. I think that's quite exciting. But don't want to hold you any longer, Dirk. It's been a pleasure having you participate in this conference. As I said, we've got a lot of folks around the globe who you may not see, but certainly have enjoyed your presentation as we have, and we thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks.